friends, and welcome to For the Love of Revenue Cycle. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're kicking off our orthopedics focus with a deep dive into what makes the orthopedic revenue cycle different from general RCM, where the nuances are, where the gotchas live, and how to set your teams up for success across the whole cycle. Quick housekeeping before we jump in. If this episode is helpful, please follow and rate the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It truly takes just a couple of seconds, and it helps more folks find us. You can always send questions and topic ideas on LinkedIn or through For the Love of Revenue Cycle community. I love hearing what you're working on. All right, let's get started. My goal here is simple. Walk the cycle end to end and call out what's specific to orthopedic practices. You'll hear me come back to 4 themes: prior authorization and payer policy awareness, global surgical rules, care settings that often sit alongside the practice, such as physical and occupational therapy and the ambulatory surgery center, and payer types that behave differently, especially workers' compensation. So I'll weave in practical tips for scheduling, registration, coding and charge entry, claims review, payment posting, and AR, plus a few management takeaways you can act on this month. So let's begin where the revenue cycle begins for your patient: the phone call or the online scheduling request. In orthopedics, the intake has to do more than just get a date on the calendar. It needs to identify the type of problem, the likely setting of care, and any non-commercial payers scenarios up front. I recommend a short, consistent intake script for schedulers. Ask the patient why they're being seen and listen for words like injury, fall, post-op check, therapy, injection, brace fitting, or imaging follow-up. Then ask directly, don't guess, whether the injury happened at work or could involve a third party, such as an auto accident. If the answer is yes to work, start collecting workers' comp information immediately: the claim number, employer, adjuster or case manager name and phone, mailing address for medical bills, and most importantly, the body part involved. That body part detail matters because people can have more than one open work comp claim. You want to link the visit to the correct one from the start. So appointment types matter a lot in orthopedics. They steer time on the provider's schedule, they help registration know what to collect, and they tee up what the coding and billing team expects to see. Build clear appointment types for new injuries, post-op global checks, injection visits, imaging-related visits, therapy evaluations, and DME brace fittings, just for a few examples. You'll use those labels later to prevent avoidable denials. For example, by not collecting a copay on a global post-op visit, or by making sure the injection visit triggers the correct supply and administration coding. So on to registration and check-in. You've heard me say this in other episodes. Accuracy at the front end is a revenue protector. In orthopedics, that starts with precise demographics, up-to-date insurance details, and, because of the mix of visit types, clarity on eligibility and benefit design for specialty visits, like therapy, DME, and ASC services. If your system lets you scan insurance and ID cards, scan them every time something changes, and make sure the card you see matches the plan you're going to bill. If the patient is coming in as a post-op within a global period, your registration and check-in process should make that visible, ideally with a flag on the account that shows the surgery date and the global end date, so you don't assess a copay or trigger an unneeded office E&M. So let's talk prior authorization, because orthopedics lives with it every single day. Imaging, injections, DME, and surgeries frequently require a prior auth. So here's the principle to anchor on. If a prior authorization is required by the payer for that specific service, you must obtain it before the service is rendered. If a prior authorization is not required for that service by that payer, then you're not blocked from payment by the absence of an auth. Either way, document your verification. When you confirm that no auth is required, capture the reference number or a screenshot of the payer portal and attach it to the encounter. When an auth is required, capture the authorization number and link it to the encounter so it can flow to the claim. Keep a short list by payer and by CPT family of which services require PAs in your practice. That list will do more to prevent denials than any speech I could give you. Related to PA is payer policy awareness. Many high-value orthopedic services have payer clinical or billing policies that act like pre-service checklists, conservative therapy expectations, imaging prerequisites, or documentation standards that must be met before surgery is covered. Don't leave that knowledge in one person's inbox. Publish those policies where schedulers, surgery schedulers, providers, and the authorization team can see them. Before you put a patient on the surgery schedule, check the policy and make sure that required steps are in the chart. The months of therapy, the imaging, the trials, whatever the payer outlines. If the policy says it's required, skipping it will risk non-payment even with a prior auth on file. So now let's step into the encounter and the coding it drives. This is where global surgical rules show up. Orthopedic surgeons live inside global periods more than most specialties. The global package includes typical post-op visits and the work directly related to the procedure. Those services shouldn't generate separate E&M charges or copays during the global. Documentation should make it clear when something is unrelated to the surgery, staged as planned, or a complication that required a return to the OR. Help your providers by sharing simple, direct prompts. When it's the visit where a decision for a major surgery happens, have them say so in the note, which of course supports Modifier 57. During a global period, if the patient is seen for an unrelated problem, make that clear, because that supports Modifier 24. For procedures during the global, make it clear whether it's staged or unrelated, which will support Modifier 58. A return to the OR for a complication supports Modifier 78, or an unrelated procedure, which supports Modifier 79. These aren't tricks. They're clear ways to tell the story that the payers look for. And as always, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen, and if it didn't happen, it can't be billed. Fracture care is another area where orthopedics has unique patterns. Closed treatment codes usually include casting or splinting and the typical follow-ups. If you also report a same-day office visit, your documentation must support that the E&M addressed something separate and significant to avoid a bundling denial. Again, documentation leads, coding follows. Therapy and DME are often under the same roof or tightly affiliated with ortho practices. Therapy coding and billing rely on correct therapy modifiers like GP or GO, depending, of course, on the discipline. Depends on correct units and accurate plan of care documentation. Because many of the same therapy CPTs repeat across dates, duplicates are common. Not because they're actually duplicates, but because something small was off in the linkage or the modifier. So keep a close eye on those edits so real duplicates don't hide real payable services. For DME, know which items are included in the procedure and which are separately billable, and make sure the documentation supports the fitting or education time when that's the basis for the code. Let's connect that to claims creation and review. In orthopedics, you want your clean claim review handled by someone who actually knows ortho, ideally a coder or a biller with deep orthopedic experience. The goal is to catch the most common preventables before they leave your system. Missing or incorrect modifiers, incorrect global handling, therapy modifier issues, DME linkage, NCCI bundling, and diagnosis to procedure linking that doesn't tell the right story. And that's just the beginning, right? This is also where you can spot wrong place of service, office versus facility, and prevent underpayment, and where you attach the authorization reference so it makes it to the claim. If you're using a clearinghouse or a third-party edit tool, tune the edits to the orthopedic patterns you see every week. Generic edit packages won't catch half the things that matter to you. Let's pause on a denial that shows up more in ortho than in many other specialties: assistant surgeon usage. Certain procedures allow an assistant, others don't. If you bill with an assistant surgeon where the payer's policy or the RVU table says it isn't allowed, you'll see denials that read like assistant surgeon not payable for this procedure. Make sure your team that builds surgery cases checks the assistant surgery indicator before the claim goes out. And keep a quick reference list for your highest volume procedures so you're not chasing denials later. Another frequent denial in ortho relates to provider type and taxonomy. often a B7 reason code. This can happen when the wrong taxonomy code is sent on the electronic claim or when payer enrollment data isn't up to date. Orthopedic groups often have subspecialties like pediatric ortho, sports medicine, hand, different therapy disciplines. Load the correct taxonomies into your billing system, make sure they're populating the electronic claim, and align your enrollment records at the payer. On paper claims, taxonomy doesn't transmit the same way, so be precise on your EDI setup and test it. If you start seeing provider type not eligible for this service on a service you know your clinicians perform, verify taxonomy first and confirm the payer's provider file is current. So let's move to settings of care, because orthopedics often spans them all. Therapy is one, and the ambulatory surgery center is another big one. ASC reimbursement works differently from the office professional fee world. Contracts often include carve-outs or packaging differences. Don't assume your professional contract rules apply in the ASC. On the ASC side, pay attention to implants and devices that are separately payable versus packaged. Load those rules into your contract and your edit logic. On the professional side, if the procedure took place in a facility, confirm that your place of service reflects that, because RVUs and allowable amounts shift between office and facility settings. On the topic of implants and devices used in surgery, know what's included in the main procedure and what's separately reported in your contracts and per payer policy. For the items that are separately reimbursed, you'll need accurate documentation that they were used and what was used. Again, documentation first, because if it isn't in the op note, it didn't happen and it can't be billed. Workers' compensation deserves its own lane in ortho. Many orthopedic groups have a high percentage of work comp volume, and work comp behaves differently. Adjudication times are longer. Electronic claim acceptance is inconsistent by state and carrier. Many carriers still require paper claims and paper EOBs. That means more scanning, more postage, and more manual tracking. Plan for it. When you mail a work comp claim, don't wait 60 days to see what happened. Confirm receipt early so you can correct routing issues correctly. Because carriers frequently send an EFT with a paper EOB, create a system that lets your AR team view those EOBs images easily and link them to the claim in your billing system. Those EOBs often carry valuable detail you'll need to follow up. And recognize that work comp calls take time. Many claims require calling a case manager, leaving messages, and working through a portal that doesn't behave like your commercial payer portals. Staff this work with people who know the work comp landscape and give them the time to do it right. The flip side is that allowable amounts for work comp are often higher than commercial, so the return is usually there if you staff and track properly. So let's come back to AR follow-up more broadly. For orthopedics, prioritize work queues with your realities in mind. Global periods change which services should be on a claim. Assistant surgeon roles vary. Therapy repeats the same codes day after day, and work comp takes longer. So organize your AR so that time-sensitive commercial claims and global sensitive services don't age out while you're waiting on the work comp clock. Define how often you'll touch each payer type and be explicit about your no response path. Verify registration and insurance first, check clearinghouse rejects next, confirm claim status, and then escalate. That order saves time and prevents you from appealing a claim that never actually made it onto the payer system. Payment posting matters here too. Orthopedics isn't just data entry. Posting requires understanding global handling, therapy caps, or visit limits where applicable, and how to route balances based on policy. If your ERA posting throws exceptions, work those exceptions quickly, because this is where small misroutes become big AR. And when you post EOBs that point to missing documentation or a policy requirement, send that signal back upstream so the next claim doesn't suffer the same fate. A few quick items on credentialing and contracting because they affect payment before you touch a claim. Make sure your payer contracts reflect your real service mix. ASC work, therapy services, DME, and any specialty carve-outs for high-cost items. Confirm that your provider's enrollments and taxonomies align with what you bill in each setting. If you're expanding into therapy or adding a new subspecialty surgeon, get ahead of enrollment. Those details show up later as avoidable denials. Charge capture needs special attention for surgeries performed at outside facilities. If your surgeons operate at multiple hospitals or ASCs that don't share an EMR with your practice, build a reliable reconciliation process. Someone should be responsible for matching scheduled surgeries to received op notes and to entered charges. If you can get read-only access to the facility EMR, do it. If not, work with the provider to make sure op notes and charge details arrive consistently. Lost op notes turn into lost claims, and in orthopedics, those dollars add up quickly. Seasonality is another factor that's easy to overlook if you're new to orthopedics. Volume patterns move with the calendar and the climate. In places like here in Chicago, you'll often see more injuries in winter months. Compare year over year, not just month to month, so you don't panic in July with a January benchmark. And build staffing plans with those swings in mind, both in front-end coverage and in coding and AR, because the wave that hits your providers today hits your coders and posters a few days later, and your AR team a few weeks after that. Let's do a short section for leaders and managers. Practical, do this next items, okay? Publish a one-page orthopedic PA map by payer and service family. Keep it current, link to the policy or portal, and make it easy to find. Add a simple global tracking indicator to the chart, surgery date and global end date. Make that visible to scheduling, registration, coding, and billing so everyone is working from the same facts. Tune your claim edits to orthopedic patterns. Add checks for therapy modifiers, common NCCI pairs you see in your cases, global modifiers, assistant surgeon indicators, and place of service mismatches, just as a few examples. Reconcile surgery schedules to charges every single week. Name a person, write the steps, and audit the process. Separate work comp in your AR dashboards. Track work comp timelines separately from commercial and Medicare so you don't let commercial claims age out while you wait on work comp, and so you can see true performance by payer type. Review taxonomy and enrollment once a quarter. If you add a new provider type, say a pediatric orthopedist or a new therapy discipline, confirm the taxonomy is loaded and transmitting on the claim and that payer files are updated. In your patient-facing processes, teach copay handling for global post-ops. Don't collect a copay for a visit that lives inside the global period. Now, a few common denials to expect and how to keep them away. Bundling with CO97 when a component was already included in another code. Prevention here is knowing your NCCI edits and your procedure pairings. Missing or incorrect global modifiers. Prevention is clear provider documentation and a strong review step. Assistant surgeon not allowed. Prevention is checking the indicator before you bill. Provider type or taxonomy mismatch, like B7. Prevention is accurate taxonomy on the electronic claim and current payer files. And duplicates in therapy that aren't truly duplicates. Prevention is correct modifiers and linking. For each of these, build a short how we prevent it note and put it where the work happens, inside your edit tool, in your quick reference guide, or both. Before we wrap, one more point about documentation because it's the foundation. Whether it's a fracture treatment that includes the cast, an injection with ultrasound guidance, post-op check in the global, or a DME fitting, your documentation should reflect what was actually done. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. And if it didn't happen, it can't be billed. That keeps you compliant and it keeps you paid. So let's land on this. Orthopedics shares the same revenue cycle stages as any specialty, but the mix of services, settings, and payer types gives it its own shape. You'll see more global package handling, more authorization work, more therapy and DME, more ASC nuance, more workers' compensation, and more high-dollar claims that demand precise setup and follow-through. If you serve orthopedics as an employee, a manager, a consultant, or a technology partner, build with those realities in mind. That focus protects your revenue and makes the patient's financial experience smoother. If this episode was useful, please follow and rate the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It makes a difference and helps more people find conversations like this. You can send your questions or topics you want me to cover through LinkedIn or the For the Love of Revenue Cycle community. I love hearing from you and bringing your real-world scenarios into the show. Thank you for spending time with me. I look forward to meeting you again. Ciao.